Good morning. And those of you who were here last week, how's your life? Thank you. Let's say that again. How's your life? Wonderful. So are you ready for the next step? Yes. Well, somebody is, some of you. Obviously, those of you who set your clocks ahead. Well, I have a confession that when I was looking at the theme for this month, I knew what I wanted to talk about, but I was trying to put it into our, being awake, waking up to whatever. So I was thinking, well, what would that look like? Being awake to what doesn't work. That just doesn't look good on a calendar, being awake to what doesn't work or being awake to what doesn't serve. And so that's when I just did the acronym, Let's Eliminate Negative Thinking for Lent. But I knew I was talking about being awake to this stuff. And so last week we got on the no complaint zone idea of living. And we're fasting this month. We're jumping on the bandwagon of all those Christians who are fasting for this season that we call Lent that precedes Easter, and not do it exactly like they are, but take advantage of people saying, what can I open more fully to so that I may know a renewal and rebirth at Easter? And so we just kind of jump on that consciousness by fasting from what doesn't serve. So last week we did criticism. This week we're going to look at criticisms to sisters. Last week we did complaints. Now I've given it away. Oh no. This week we're going to do complaints to sisters, criticism, and judgment. So let's do a little definition in the beginning so we kind of know what's what. Especially with judgment, because I had once somebody sort of ask me, well, what do you mean don't judge? Are you saying not to evaluate or discriminate? You have to. I was like, yeah, okay. I don't mean don't evaluate, don't discriminate what works for you. I need to have some sense of critical thinking to say what works for me in my life. But what I'm talking about is, in terms of judgment, is passing judgment, needing to declare people and things wrong. And then that wonderful thing about criticism, that is that finely attuned sense to what isn't working with other people, or myself, or in the world, and sharing about it. In some cases, sharing a lot about it. So that's what I'm talking about. Now, Emma, who we started reviewing last week, Emma Curtis Hopkins, Nike Woman of New Thought, a teacher of Ernest Holmes, our founder, Emma. I don't read her very often. Emma has a great thing. When we are doing this criticism and judgment, she said basically we are accusing the world, ourselves, and other people of sin. So she just calls it like we are accusing them of sin. And what does she say in her own Nike way? Stop it! So let's look at this for a minute. How do you feel when somebody criticizes or judges you? How does that make you feel inside? We all know it's happened to all of us. No one gets out of here alive, and no one gets out of here without being either criticized directly or hearing about it later, how someone's judged us. It's really fun. And if you really want to experience, I invite you to become a minister. Well, we all have that experience. We know what it feels like. But I ask you to also consider another question. What does it feel like in you when you criticize? And when you judge someone or something? So just take a moment and be with that. Think of the last time you criticized somebody. You told them what was wrong with what they did, or who they were, or let them know you had a judgment about them. Because I'm betting that only felt good for a moment, and it probably only felt good because there was something you weren't feeling good about you, and so quickly, well, I might think I'm bad, but look at them and what they're doing. That's really bad. So you get that little heat off for a second. But then, do you feel more powerful? Do you feel better about yourself? Do you feel better about the situation, having criticized and judged? I don't. I don't. Another question. Tell me, or tell yourself, how that criticism thing, how's that working for you in relationship? Especially your intimate relationships. How's that criticism thing working? Does it make you feel closer because you've been authentic and honest about who they are? Another question. Does it improve things? Do they tend to change along the direction of your thoughtful criticism? Not usually. Not usually. In fact, a lot of times we get pushback. We get more of what we don't want. You don't like that? Well, I'll show you some. You think that was bad? Let me show you some. And that's one of the first problems with criticism, is that we think if we point out what somebody's doing that's not effective, that it's going to make them change. But it doesn't usually get that result, because we do get the pushback. We get the hurt feelings. We get resistance, and we get distance. We get distance, which is not really what any of us are looking for. That, oh, I was so right about how wrong they were and how there's this better way to do this. It just doesn't last long enough. And we know that when we criticize, we disempower. We feel disempowered, you know, when you're judged or criticized. It's like the balloon, prick. We feel disempowered, and so we need to remember that when we're criticizing others, it disempowers them. Now, Emma has a few terse things to say about judgment and criticism, and they were so good that I wanted to read them to you. She doesn't mince words. She does not mince words about what criticism and judgment do. She says, first of all, that every person is an expression of our traits of character. So we've heard this before, but Emma knew it way back then. Every person we see is an expression of our traits of character. So who are we really judging and criticizing? That's why it's called projection. And then she says, and some of you have heard this before, but I just love it. Let's see, I don't think I need to do that one again. No. Okay. Thus it is with all of us. We look upon others in the red or green or blue tints of our own ideas and see them entirely different from what they are in reality. Then exactly what we describe as their character, which is not the truth about them, must be our own type of mind in some of its ways. So she's still talking about projection. Then after doing this, after judging them according to the stuff that's probably in us, then when we get the punishments we have felt honestly belong to them, we are utterly astonished and grieved and feel much abused. This explains why the righteous are strangely afflicted. And she also gets about the inefficiency. She says, you have no idea how much of the inefficiency of mankind comes from thinking about the wrongdoings of others and ourselves. How much inefficiency of the world is created as we think about, ponder, dwell on, let alone point out the wrongdoings of ourselves and others. And she also says this. For those of you who are saying, well, still, if you want to get ahead in life, nothing alive and solid with success ever stays in the hands of people who are given to accusing others or themselves of sin. Nothing solid ever stays. Prosperity will always be elusive. Health will always seem to go the other way if what we spend our time doing is accusing the world or ourselves of sin. And finally, it makes us old. She talked about complaining too, did that last week. So I love that she's got that. And by the way, youth is kept by refusing to believe evil of ourselves or others of the world. Youth is kept by that. So who knew fasting from complaining, criticizing, and judging is actually a beauty treatment? You heard it here, folks. So what is sin in Emma's eyes? She says, sin is just a mistaken idea about ourselves, about the world, or about other people that we keep believing in. It's just a mistaken idea. And so anything that we might call sin, it's just we're having a mistaken belief. And when people are doing things we consider wrong, it's because they have a mistaken belief. I heard this once and I so believe it. Everything everybody does is a call for love. It's just that a lot of us were not trained or skillful in how to do that effectively. So we know it's whether the kids acting out or ourselves, trying to get attention or trying to be invisible or all those ways. Everything people are doing is a call for love. It's just we don't get the manual. Here's an effective way to be loved and loving. So we get some pretty weird ideas. And so if we can think of that, about those things that we're accusing people of doing, it can start shifting things. Because here's the thing, all those things about being strangely afflicted and what we're judging other people on and saying, is wrong, is going to come back to haunt us or make us look old or create distance, ultimately the biggie is that when our minds are full of what is wrong, what somebody is doing that is just ugly and nasty and small-minded or clueless, is there is no room for God in that. Our minds are completely occupied with this thing that in other churches are called sin, these mistaken ideas. Our minds are occupied with that. And as I reminded us last week, and hope that I remind us almost every week, is that wherever our minds are dwelling, there our life follows. Whatever we dwell on, we call forth more of. And whatever we name and label and judge, we fix in reality. So whether we say, God, that person is such a blankety blank, we fix that. How do you behave around people who think you're an idiot or a jerk or a slob or what? We all have our things that we fear we are. Then, there's the stuff that just goes over our head because we know we're not that. But the people that we know have a low opinion about us, or sometimes it's our family who just still see us as this spacey little kid or whatever the particular thing was, how do we tend to act when we're around those people? Do you show up in your fullness? You might try, but it's sort of a struggle, and the struggle to be in your fullness that usually doesn't work. When people see us a certain way and label us and call us that and remind us, it tends to stick us in that. We rise to people's expectations, and sometimes the ways we rise are really falling. And so when we do that on other people, then we are supporting them in being less than their highest self. We are supporting them in staying stuck in the very behavior that we want to point out to them is wrong. So all of this is a detour from, I think, what is the life that all of us want to live and the world that all of us want to create. Do you want to create more stuff to criticize? Do you want to create in your partner more of the difficulties you're seeing? Do you want to creating a world in which there is inconsideration for other people and displacement of wealth and pollution? Do you want to create a world that contains more joy, more health available for all, more love, more love, more love, more of the good? Again, we ask this every week. So it is, where do we put our minds? In every person we see, there is something that we can find that even we can label as good. We can choose to see that and call on that. We can choose to see, or if not, ask what this strange behavior that's not in my manual of how to get liked, we could ask them what that behavior is about. And we need to be real. What do we do with the clueless, annoying people and situations that show up in our life? I mean, that's where my mind went when I was writing this. Okay, so what do we do with those things? I must admit, this is a perfect weekend to do this because I have a judgment about people who are not aware that daylight savings went off. And I have a little bit about that. In fact, I have a lot. And so what do I do as I'm seeing this? Say, well, what is that about in me? So I look at, I have to be aware of it. I don't get to not pay attention to those kinds of things. Boy, if I didn't pay attention and I didn't come to church, boy, would I be in trouble, and I don't get to slack off. And then I go, like the world would end if I wasn't here. But for me, it's that, making up that my life is so hard or that I'm the only responsible person or all that just junky junk. that has nothing to do with anybody else, but has to do with a mistaken idea about who I think I have to be one day a year. Well, the other one, I'm totally on setting the clock. I never miss the set the clock back and an extra hour to sleep. Never going to be missing that one. No, that's like written in my heart. But, for me, it comes from that fear because I am, as some of you might know, a little touched getting places on time. So that fear of being judged because I'm often late, makes this like the big potential day. So yeah, I get on my own stuff about it and get fear about it, and then I don't like those feelings, and of course this is all happening in nanosecond. So then I make everybody else wrong who's not living in fear of being late. Oh, this stuff is so fascinating. We are endlessly fascinating if we look at ourselves sometimes. But again, do I want to accuse? And I love her word because that's really what we're doing with all that criticism and judgment. J'accuse. I am accusing myself of things, of sin, of sloth, of whatever, even though I don't use those words. And it's just this mistaken idea that I am not whole, perfect, complete, and lovable, even if I'm time challenged. And we are all whole, complete, and lovable, even if we need somebody to call us, to remind us. Are you going to set your clock forward? So, back to what to really do when we find ourselves in that place of these clueless, annoying people and situations. Emma's prescription, the quickest way I know, she says, to get healing going, which really means restoring wholeness to any situation, wholeness to our heart when we're in that place. The quickest way I know to get healing going, and some of you know what's coming, is praise everyone and everything. Praise everyone and everything. Praise everyone and everything. Because what am I doing? I am calling out the good that is possible. Again, those of us who've been reading Shortcut to a Miracle and looking at the physics, everything before it comes into existence is a tendency. That field of all possibilities that is God, everything is a tendency. And so as we call it, we pull out that tendency. So as we praise everyone and everything, we call out the tendency for healing. We call out the tendency for good. We call out the tendency for possibility, for joy, for greater life, for greater love, for greater abundance. We praise everyone and everything. We remember that those things that we want to judge and name as bad, we're ultimately calling sins in our mind, and it is just a mistaken idea. It's just a mistaken idea. And if we do need to get in interactions, which we do with our kids, we do with our coworkers, we certainly do with the people we live with, instead of telling them, and this is just a little practical thing, instead of telling them what they're doing wrong, tell them what you would like. There's this wonderful thing called the Virtues Project that 3 people, a husband, wife, and then the sibling, I think, of the female, put together this thing called the Virtues Project. And they put it together as a training for children, actually, in churches. But what they did was they surveyed cultures around the world and came up with virtues. They didn't want to say values because those they found could change from culture to culture, like whether, you know, being forthright was a value, or being sort of assertive was a value, and some being very quiet was a value. Like if you went from the United States to Japan, you'd find some very different values. But if they looked at virtues, they found things that were common. And so they came up with this list, and I can't even remember, but it's a fat book through. And we used it up in Seattle for a number of years, and several churches used it in their children's program. And what they did was they each week would study a virtue, but what they taught both the children and their teachers and then the parents to do is to call the virtue that you want. When the kids are being noisy and rambunctious and you're kind of, you don't say, "You're being noisy," because you're calling it, fixing it. Say, "What I require is some quiet. What I would like is some peace and quiet. I would love you to be peaceful. Name what it is that you want. Call that forth." Instead of naming the sin. So when we do that, we're giving them that we're both looking at the direction of what's wanted. And just like I said, when you go home or are with people that you know do not hold you in high esteem, it calls out. It doesn't call out the best in you. But when you think of the people that love you the most, that truly love you, it's the ones who see the beauty and good in you. And they ignore the rest. And I hope every one of you has somebody like that in your life. I grew up in a family that felt like they were doing a service if they pointed out to us, and I got trained up very well in that. You know, you're going to want to fix it. You're going to want to be fixing that. But I have a dear friend who I know does not see the times that I've been inconsiderate, the times I've been abrupt, the times I've been this and that and not perfect. She just sees the beauty in me. She sees the good in me. She sees the love in me, and she tells me about it. And so in her presence, of course, I love being around her, but in her presence, I am those things I want to be. And I become that. Think about that. I hope, again, that you have people in your lives who do that. As practitioners, we are trained to tell the truth to you. And the truth that we endeavor to be reminding you of is that unlimited nature that you are, that perfection and completeness that you are, that love that you are. Even if your life in that moment is not a reflection of that. We call out the truth so that reality can follow us. So that reality can follow us. That reality of good can follow our thinking. So practice. Practice, practice, practice. First practice is, as you go through the day, notice yourself. If you are accusing the world, someone else, or yourself of any, withdraw your accusation. Withdraw your projection. And put your mind on what is really being called forth. Because any crummy situation is asking for something greater, isn't it? Anything we can look out in the world and see that we don't love it, it is calling for something to be known. something greater to be known than what seems to exist. So we can call that forth in our prayers. I brought this up, I don't even know, a month or maybe the beginning of the year. The great, I had the word earlier in the service, now I've lost it. When the letters, like Lent, let's end negative thinking or eliminate, what's that called? Thank you. The acronym for think. Think before we speak. So before I say something, I think to the person, is it true? T. Is it helpful? I. Is it inspiring? Will it lift them? Because I could think it might be true and helpful to let you know that that color really does not look good on you. And I could. Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it necessary? Or can that be your own little opinion? It doesn't have to be shared. And K, is it kind? So we remember to think before we speak. True, helpful, inspiring, necessary, kind. And finally, the big old practice is to start the morning and praise and raise. Praise your life. Praise the people that you love. Praise the people that you're having challenges with. Politicians, you know that one. Praise countries. Praise the world. Start in the morning calling forth that praise and good and life, that conferring of life. And in the evening, do the same thing before you go to sleep. Praise, praise and raise your life, your day, your world. Anybody you might have had a kind of with, praise and raise them. When we praise and raise, it starts activating something in our heart, and it shifts. It shifts, it shifts, it shifts. So, we're going to practice that right now because we all could be doing some praising and raising. So, the basic movements, I praise X, I raise X, in the name of, and you bring your hands into your heart, in the name of, and you could do different things. So today we're going to practice in the name of love. You can say in the name of joy, in the name of wholeness, but for what we're really talking about here, those three sisters, I think love is a good thing. So, those of you who feel comfortable, stand. And when I was first taught this, I was taught that we always begin and end with ourselves. I think that's really a powerful thing to do, so that we know that we too, I'm not just talking about accusing the world, I'm talking about accusing ourselves, which some of us do more than any of that other kind. So, first, we're going to praise ourselves in the name of love, and we'll do that 3 times. So, I praise myself, I raise myself in the name of love. I praise myself, I raise myself in the name of love. I praise myself, I raise myself in the name of love. Okay. So now I want you to just come up quickly with the name of a person or a situation that you can just name it with 1 word or 2 words. And, you know, you can say this very quietly, but, okay, everybody take a minute. Something that you're having kind of an about. Okay, so now I'm going to invite us to do that 3 times with that name, and you can say that name very quietly, or you can say it inside yourself. And we're all going to be doing our own, so we're not going to be listening, any of you. So we'll do that 3 times. Praise and raise in the name of love. So, I raised. I raised in the name of love. Now, let's do the world. So, my world in the name of love. I praise my world. I raise my world in the name of love. I praise my world. I raise my world in the name of love. I praise my world. I raise my world in the name of love. And now let's do the last one, my life. I praise my life. I raise my life in the name of love. I praise my life. I raise my life in the name of love. I praise my life. I raise my life in the name of love. And so it is.